welcome back to Learn English with Pretty. I'm thrilled to bring you the second episode in our brand new series where we turn your favorite books into podcasts. If you enjoyed the first episode, you're going to love what we've got for you today. This time, Emily and Jack, our hosts, are tackling Why We Sleep by Matthew Walker, a deep dive into the science of sleep and why it's essential for your health, productivity, and overall well-being. They'll explore fascinating insights about how sleep affects your brain and body, and they'll give you some practical tips to get better rest. So get comfy, let's join Emily and Jack as they break down this eye-opening book in a way that's easy to understand and super helpful. Stay tuned and let's get started.
Welcome back, everyone. Ready for another deep dive? Today, we're going deep into a topic that's, well, honestly, way more captivating than it might seem at first glance. Sleep.
Sleep? Right.
Yeah, sleep. We've got Matthew Walker's Why We Sleep. We're going to unpack this whole thing about why we spend like a third of our lives passed out and why it's so incredibly important.
You know, most people, they don't realize that good sleep, like consistent quality sleep, it's right up there with diet and exercise when it comes to our health. It's that fundamental.
And yet we sacrifice it so easily, right? Like deadlines, late nights, that extra episode of whatever you're binging. Suddenly it's 2 a.m. and we're relying on coffee to function the next day.
It's become a badge of honor, hasn't it? Running on fumes.
Exactly. But what if I told you that driving drowsy is actually riskier than driving drunk? Statistically speaking, it's true. Or how about this? Even being a little sleep deprived, just a little, can mess with your memory, your mood, and even your weight.
Walker's book is packed with these eye-opening facts. And you know, one of the things that makes sleep so fascinating is that for the longest time, science couldn't really explain why we do it.
Yeah.
Like, we get why we eat, why we drink water, but sleep, that was a mystery.
It does seem kind of risky when you think about it evolutionarily. I mean, we're completely unconscious, vulnerable, can't even grab a snack for a third of our lives. Bizarre.
Right. And what's really wild is what scientists are now discovering about what our brains are up to during sleep. Turns out, it's far from a passive process.
So tell me more about that. What's going on in our sleep state that impacts us so much when we're awake?
So, Walker's research presents this kind of radical idea, a real shift in how we think about sleep. He argues that sleep was likely the very first state of life, our default setting, waking consciousness, all this stuff we do while we're awake. That came later.
Wow. So you're saying sleep isn't just something we do, it's like ingrained in us, maybe even predates our ability to, well, think, to be aware.
Exactly. It reframes the whole thing. We're not just talking about feeling rested, it's about our brains and bodies performing vital functions they need to survive.
And when we mess with that, when we're chronically sleep deprived, there are consequences. We've touched on that.
Big time consequences.
Which brings us to the different stages of sleep and what's actually happening during each one, right? It's not just lights on, lights off.
You got it. We cycle through different stages throughout the night. NREM sleep, which stands for non-rapid eye movement sleep, and then there's REM sleep, that's rapid eye movement. Each stage has its own unique brainwave patterns. Imagine it like, I don't know, a perfectly synchronized symphony. Different instruments playing their parts at specific times.
Okay, I like that. So walk me through this symphony of sleep. Let's start with deep sleep. What's happening in our brains when we're really out, like those deepest stages of sleep?
So deep sleep, that happens in stages 3 and 4 of NREM sleep, and this is where things get super interesting. Our brains are incredibly active, but in a different way than when we're awake. The neurons, they start firing in these slow, synchronized waves. Almost like, you know, when you're at a football game and the whole crowd starts chanting together.
Okay, so not shutting down, but shifting gears. What's the benefit of all that synchronized neuron activity?
That right there, that's memory consolidation in action, is where your brain transfers short-term memories into long-term storage. Think of it like this. Your brain's like a computer, limited RAM. Deep sleep is basically hitting save, clearing that short-term memory cache to make room for new stuff.
Makes sense. I definitely remember things better after a good night's sleep. What about REM sleep, though? That's dreamland, right?
You got it. REM sleep. That's when the brain really comes alive.
Yeah.
There's a surge of activity, especially in the areas that deal with processing emotions, memory, and visual imagery, which makes sense, given that's when we dream.
Which explains why dreams can be so vivid and, well, sometimes completely bizarre. Any idea why our brains cook up those strange stories while we sleep?
While there's still a lot we don't fully understand about dreams, research suggests that REM sleep plays a critical role in processing our emotions and developing our social and emotional intelligence.
So not just randomness then, potentially a way for us to unpack our feelings, the events of our lives, and even become more empathetic and understanding individuals. Amazing to think about how much is happening while we sleep, especially when it comes to our emotional well-being.
It really is. And, speaking of emotions, earlier you mentioned how sleep, or lack of it, can impact things like our mood, even our weight. It's more than just feeling a bit groggy the next day, isn't it? What's really going on when we don't get enough sleep?
Yeah, we touched on the good stuff, the benefits, but what about that flip side? What happens when we skimp on sleep? What's the real cost?
Well, it hits us on so many levels. Like you said, weight gain. When you're sleep deprived, your body starts churning out more of that hunger hormone, ghrelin, and less leptin, which tells you you're full. So basically, your brain's convinced it's starving, even if you've eaten.
So those late night cravings aren't just me being weak-willed, it's my hormones going haywire.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it goes way beyond just raiding the fridge at midnight. Studies show a clear link between not getting enough sleep consistently and a higher risk of some serious health problems. Heart disease, stroke, type 2 diabetes, even certain types of cancer.
Whoa, okay, that's a scary list. It's not just about being tired, is it? This is serious stuff. Like we're slowly but surely undermining our health, one bad night's sleep at a time.
Powerful analogy, and unfortunately, pretty accurate. And remember all those emotional benefits we were talking about? Sleep deprivation, it sabotages those too. You're way more likely to feel, on edge, stressed, just generally more reactive when you haven't slept well.
Makes you wonder how many arguments, how much miscommunication could be avoided if everyone just got enough sleep, It's like this silent factor affecting our relationships, how we interact with the world.
It's huge. And it speaks to this bigger picture, right? Sleep deprivation, it doesn't just impact us individually, it has this ripple effect. Our families, our workplaces, society as a whole. Imagine if everyone was well rested. How much more productive, creative, even just kinder could we be?
It's a nice thought, isn't it? A well-rested world. But for some people, it's not as simple as just deciding to turn in early. What about folks who deal with insomnia, for example?
Absolutely. Insomnia is incredibly common, and it can be truly debilitating. And it's important to remember, it's not just about struggling to fall asleep, it's the impact it has on your entire day.
It's that feeling of dragging yourself through the day, right? Can't focus, everything's irritating, completely drained, no way to live.
Exactly. And while there are effective treatments out there, cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia, medication, there are options. There's still this lack of understanding. People suffer in silence, thinking it's just something they have to live with.
It's almost taboo, isn't it? We don't talk about sleep problems enough. We celebrate those who brag about functioning on minimal sleep like it's a competition. But as we're seeing, sleep is non-negotiable. And then there are the rarer, more, I guess you could say, frightening sleep disorders out there. We mentioned fatal familial insomnia earlier.
Right. That's a tragic example of what happens when sleep completely fails. It really highlights how essential sleep is for survival itself. But thankfully, that's incredibly rare. A more common, though still disruptive, sleep disorder is narcolepsy.
Yeah, narcolepsy, definitely often misunderstood. People might joke about falling asleep randomly, but for someone with narcolepsy, those sleep attacks, those sudden urges to sleep, they're uncontrollable, potentially terrifying, even dangerous.
Absolutely. Imagine that, suddenly being overcome with sleepiness anywhere, anytime, driving, at work, in the middle of a conversation. It's a neurological disorder, disrupts the brain's whole sleep-wake cycle, makes daily life really, really tough.
Definitely a disorder that deserves understanding, support, not judgment. So we've covered a lot of ground here, haven't we? The science of sleep, those different stages, what happens when we don't get enough, both individually and as a society. We talked about sleep disorders too, from common ones to the very rare. So where do we go from here? What can we actually do to improve our sleep, to make it a priority?
That's the million-dollar question. And the good news is there's a lot we can do. It starts with shifting our mindset. Seeing sleep is an investment, not a luxury. It's an investment in our physical health, our minds, our emotional well-being, everything. It's an investment in a better quality of life.
An investment. I like that. So how do we actually make that investment? Life gets busy, things get chaotic. How do we actually prioritize sleep?
One of the most powerful things you can do is get yourself on a consistent sleep schedule. Our bodies, they crave routine, and that includes our sleep-wake cycle. So as much as you can, try to go to bed and wake up around the same time every day. And yes, that includes weekends.
Okay, so no more sleeping in on Saturdays, even though it sounds incredibly tempting at this moment.
As tempting as it is, resist the urge. Your body will thank you for it. And this might seem obvious, but make sure your bedroom is actually designed for sleep. Think cool, dark, and quiet.
Like a sleep cave, a sanctuary for rest.
Exactly. Invest in some blackout curtains to block out that light, maybe some earplugs if you're sensitive to noise. Even small tweaks can make a big difference.
What about those devices we're all seemingly glued to these days? I bet you're going to say disconnect before bed, aren't you?
You know me too well. That blue light from our phones, tablets, laptops, it messes with our melatonin production, which is key for regulating our sleep-wake cycle. So yeah, try to power down those screens at least an hour before you want to be asleep.
Easier said than done, but I'm willing to try. What about those nights, though, when you've done everything right, but sleep just won't come?
Oh, we've all been there, tossing and turning, staring at the ceiling. One thing that can help is to actually get out of bed if you're not asleep after about 20 minutes. Do something relaxing until you feel drowsy. Read a book, listen to calming music, maybe some gentle stretches.
So it's about breaking that cycle of frustration, that anxiety that can build when you're desperate for sleep. You're retraining your brain to link being in bed with actually sleeping, not with all that worry.
Exactly. And look, if you're dealing with more than just the occasional rough night, if you're really struggling, talk to your doctor. There are really effective treatments out there for sleep disorders. No need to suffer in silence.
This has been eye-opening, really. I'm already brainstorming ways to up my sleep game. But before we wrap things up, you said earlier that we need kind of a societal shift in how we view sleep. What did you mean by that?
Well, we tend to wear sleep deprivation like a badge of honor, right?
Yeah.
Like it's proof of our dedication, our productivity. But it's time we challenge that narrative. We need to start valuing sleep as much as we value things like diet and exercise. See it as a fundamental pillar of health.
So it's about changing the culture around sleep, moving away from this whole glorification of busyness, of burning the candle at both ends.
Exactly. And that means advocating for policies that support healthy sleep. Later school start times for teenagers, for example. Addressing the issue of sleep deprivation in professions where fatigue can literally have life or death consequences.
It's about recognizing that a well-rested society is a healthier, happier, and yes, more productive society.
Couldn't agree more.
This deep dive into the science of sleep, it's been fascinating. And on that note, to all our listeners out there, we hope this has given you a new appreciation for sleep, for that essential third of your life. Go forth and prioritize your rest, folks. Not just for you, but for all of us. Sleep well.